They asked me to explain myself. I didn't. Not because I didn't have the words, but because I didn't owe them clarity. Not anymore. Every time I used to explain, they respected me less. Not because I was wrong, but because I acted like I had something to prove. You think explaining helps you stay respected. It doesn't. It shows them you're afraid to be misunderstood, and that fear is blood in the water. Because the more you explain, the more you shrink. You shift from power to permission, from being the center to being the one reacting. You think you're creating understanding, but you're actually surrendering leverage. And the moment you do that, you've lost the frame. Schopenhauer warned us clearly. To ask for an explanation is to admit inferiority. He understood what most people miss. The person asking for clarity isn't always searching for truth. Sometimes, they're just testing your stability. And when you take the bait, you collapse your own positioning. Smart people know the game. They don't explain to be understood. They move in a way that forces the world to adjust. They'd rather be unreadable than be read and dismissed. Because in a world that runs on perception, once you're seen as smaller, you never get your voice back, no matter how correct you are. If you've ever been talked over, misused, or pressured to justify your truth, pause. This isn't about silence as avoidance. It's about silence as dominance. Subscribe now if you're tired of proving what you already know is true. So, why does explaining actually weaken your image? And why do the smartest people avoid it? Especially when it costs them being liked. Let's decode the psychology of over-explaining and why real power doesn't talk. It watches. You think people misunderstand you because they don't know the full story. So you tell them everything. You explain the context. You defend the details. You try to clear things up. But here's what actually happens. The more you explain, the less they respect you. Because in psychology, explanation is a reaction. And reactions are signs of weakness. Not logic. Not clarity. Just insecurity dressed up as communication. They don't hear you defending your truth. They see you fighting for approval. And once you fight for it, you lose it. Insecurity signals. Over-explaining doesn't come from confidence. It comes from fear. Fear of being misunderstood. Fear of being judged. Fear of silence being taken the wrong way. You feel the need to fix how others see you, as if your image depends on their interpretation. That's the core trap. But the harder you try to correct their version of you, the more power you give them over how you're defined. You stop being who you are. You start becoming who they'll accept. Smart people spot this dynamic quickly. And instead of explaining, they detach. Because your identity is not up for negotiation. Authority lost power doesn't explain. It allows misunderstanding to exist because it trusts that results will correct perception. The moment you explain, you place the listener in the position of the judge, and you, the defendant. That dynamic flips your authority. You're now proving something to someone who probably doesn't matter, and definitely hasn't earned that access. People with presence don't rush to defend. They sit still while others scramble to interpret. Because true authority is quiet. It lets others question themselves. When you stop reacting, people start recalibrating. Weakness display. You think you're fixing misunderstandings. But in truth, you're showing your insecurities in high definition. Because what you explain reveals what you fear. If you over-explain your success, you're signaling that deep down, you're afraid they don't think you deserve it. If you over-explain your silence, you're admitting you can't sit with ambiguity. If you over-explain your boundaries, you're showing you fear, judgment, more than self-respect. Every sentence becomes a mirror, not of who you are, but of what you're afraid you might be. And intelligent people, they learn to shut up before that mirror cracks open too far. Defensive position. Once you explain, you react. And when you react, you lose. In social dynamics, the one who reacts the most is perceived as the least stable. The one who over-explains is seen as the one who's wrong, even if they're not. Because defensiveness signals uncertainty, and uncertainty makes people pull away. You think you're earning trust. You're actually triggering distance. When you defend yourself in conversation, you hand over control. You let them lead, and you follow. That's not communication. That's emotional surrender. And every time you do it, you train people to doubt your presence. Value degradation. Repetition devalues. Even the truth. When you say something powerful once, it lands. When you say it 10 times, it weakens. When you explain it endlessly, people tune out. Think of someone constantly saying, "I'm a good person." Eventually, you start wondering why they have to keep saying it. If it were obvious, they wouldn't need to explain. The same logic applies to your time, your beliefs, your worth. If you have to sell it, they've already priced it lower. That's why intelligent people say less. Not because they're hiding, but because value speaks better through silence. So, what does this mean for you? It means every time you feel the urge to explain, pause. Ask yourself, am I clarifying or compensating? Because not all clarification is truth-telling. Some of it is insecurity wearing a mask. And the more you wear that mask, the more people treat you like you need to. That's not presence. That's overexposure. Smart people choose a different path. They don't panic in the face of misunderstanding. They let silence do the sorting. Because the right people don't need a paragraph to get you. And the wrong people won't get you, even if you write a book. And when you finally understand that words won't save your status, you stop chasing explanation. You start mastering stillness. From this moment on, you speak less. You hold more. You don't shrink to be seen. You rise by being unreadable. In the next part, we'll break down the quiet systems smart people use to gain influence without saying a word. Smart people don't need to dominate a room with words. They dominate it by not needing to. Because the more silent they are, the more others adjust. The more still they stay, the more noise the room creates around them. That's not passivity. That's precision. Silence, when used strategically, is not absence. It's leverage. It's the kind of presence that doesn't need to be introduced, because it shifts the temperature the moment it enters the room. Let's break down how intelligent people use silence to stay in control, without ever raising their voice. Assumption of understanding. Most people explain because they're afraid of being misunderstood. But the smart, they let you assume. And they let your assumption work for them. When you say less, people fill in the blanks. And most of the time, they fill those blanks with respect, not doubt. Because no one wants to look stupid. So, they pretend they understand. They try to meet you where they think you are. That's where power flips quietly. In strategic silence, you train others to rise to your level, instead of you dropping to explain yourself. The smartest minds never rush to correct others. They let the misunderstanding sit and let others adjust their lens. Mysterious presence. When you don't say much, people lean in. Not because you're hiding, but because they're intrigued. Mystery creates pull. Not because you're evasive, but because you're not needy for recognition. In a world obsessed with sharing opinions, posting everything, proving status, the one who stays silent becomes rare. And rarity equals perceived value. The less you reveal, the more they project. And projection always favors the unknown, because people assume more about those who say less. That's why smart people are quiet, not to withhold, but to increase presence through restraint. You become magnetic, not through charm, but through calculated opacity. Action over words. Anyone can talk about what they're about to do, but few can do it without announcing it. Smart people know this. Words are easy. Execution is rare. And when you deliver in silence, you create impact that's impossible to ignore. They don't talk about boundaries. They implement them. They don't argue about standards. They enforce them through pattern. By the time someone figures out their intent, it's already too late to counter. The move has landed. The shift already happened. And here's the twist. Because it wasn't verbalized, no one can reverse engineer it. Their silence becomes a weapon. Sharp, subtle, irreversible. Strategic ambiguity. Clarity is comfortable. Ambiguity is powerful. Why? Because when you're clear, others know how to respond. But when you're vague, you force them to guess. And guessing makes people cautious. Caution makes people slower. Slowness gives you time to stay in control. The intelligent don't always make their intentions known. They don't clarify every stance. They don't speak in full paragraphs. They master the power of the unfinished sentence, the glance without explanation, the silence that leaves room for interpretation. Why? Because if they can't predict you, they can't control you. And that's the essence of psychological advantage. power preservation. Every word costs energy, and every time you explain, you give something away. A belief, a boundary, a blueprint. Smart people protect those assets. They don't verbalize everything they know, not because they're afraid, but because they're architects of mystery. They use silence to maintain asymmetry. They speak less so others reveal more. They pause longer so others fill the space with nervous over-talking the pot. And in those moments of imbalance, they gather information while giving away none. Power isn't just held by force. It's held by not revealing your next step, by not explaining your pause, by letting people guess what you're thinking and fear the answer. Subscribe now if you've realized the real strength is quiet, and that silence creates more pull than performance ever could. Because the intelligent don't overpower others. They control the tempo of the room by speaking only when it matters and being unreadable when it doesn't. But what if your silence is misunderstood? Not as strength, but as uncertainty. What if they don't feel your power because they've never seen you use it? That's the paradox. Silence builds gravity, but gravity only shifts a room when the right words drop like impact. Even the coldest mind knows silence isn't a wall. It's a weapon. And every weapon needs a trigger. In the next part, we'll break down when to speak and how to make every word feel like a move, not a message. Silence is power, but silence without precision becomes passivity. And intelligent people know there are rare moments where saying just one sentence can reset the entire dynamic. Because when you rarely speak, every word lands like a move, not a request, not a reaction. A decisión. Let's go deeper into how smart people use their voice. Not often, not emotionally, but intentionally, and always with outcome in mind. Strategic communication. Most people speak to be liked. Smart people speak to shift structure. They don't fill the air with logic or emotion. They speak when the silence is already doing the work, and their words simply seal it. You'll hear them say things like, "That's not part of my direction. I understand, but I'm not available for that. I'm already clear." You don't have to agree. These phrases don't spark dialogue. They end overthinking. They clarify boundaries without a lecture. Strategic communication is simple, grounded, and clean. It's not theatrical. It's final. Value-based sharing silence doesn't mean disconnection, but the smart only speak when it serves alignment. They don't explain themselves in rooms where energy is cheap. They don't open up just because someone's curious. When they share, it's because the space feels safe. The listener has earned proximity. The message holds weight. This isn't being closed off. It's emotional precision. Because what you say in the wrong room can be used against you in the right one. So they wait. They watch. And when the energy is clean, they speak with impact. Every word becomes currency, and they spend it carefully. Authority building. You don't have to raise your voice to prove your position. You have to own it without performance. Authority isn't loud. It's the calm tone that doesn't waver. The one sentence that changes the direction of the room. Smart people use words to reinforce what's already true, not to convince anyone. They don't justify who they are. They state it. They don't ask for permission. They move in finality. And the room follows, not because they were persuaded, but because they felt the gravity of someone who speaks with nothing to prove. That's authority. That's posture. And it comes from knowing you don't need their understanding to move forward. Influence moments. There are rare moments. Windows where someone is open, unsure, emotionally exposed. These are not debates. These are pivot points. And the intelligent don't waste them. They don't speak to sound wise. They speak to implant clarity. One sentence. One question. One silent pose, followed by a line that sticks for weeks. This is influence without force. It's the kind of talk that doesn't need to be repeated, because it lingers. Real power is not in repetition. It's in timing. And when you rarely speak, your timing becomes sacred. So remember, silence earns you gravity. Precision earns you authority. The smart don't stay quiet forever. They wait. They calculate. And when the moment appears, they strike once and never explain it. And once you master the rhythm, knowing when to hold, when to speak, you no longer need to dominate the room. You become the room, because your unpredictability becomes your protection, and your stillness becomes your shield. You don't need to be correct. You don't need to be agreed with. You just need to remain unreadable and untouchable. In the final part, you'll learn how to turn this internal shift into external command without performance, without defense, just strategic control that moves in silence and speaks only to end a pattern. You don't have to fix how others see you. You just have to stop feeding their narrative. Smart people don't waste time convincing. They simply pull their energy from what isn't worth engaging. That's not retreat. That's control. Here's your challenge. For the next 3 days, no explanations, no clarifications, no defending your truth to anyone who already doubts it. You'll feel the urge. Someone will test your silence. Someone will wait for you to react. Don't. Let them wonder. Let the space do the work. Because once you stop explaining, they start recalibrating. And that's when you notice the shift. Some people will adjust. Some will panic. The ones who respect silence will mirror it. The ones who fear loss of control will press harder. Let them. That discomfort isn't your problem. It's your filter. It shows who respects your presence and who only wants to pull energy from it. Every night, don't just reflect. Document. Write down every moment your silence made someone shift. Write down every moment your mouth wanted to explain and didn't. Who filled the space with nervous talk, who tried to bait you into reaction. What made your stillness feel uncomfortable? That's not journaling. That's psychological reconnaissance. And once you study your emotional battlefield, You stop bleeding energy into fights you never needed. Once you have it, you stop reacting. You start choosing. Because silence isn't empty. It reflects everything. And when you stop filling the air, truth has room to rise. You'll also feel something else. Peace. Not comfort. Clarity. That pressure to be understood, gone. And in its place, ownership. You stop needing others to get it. You get yourself. And that's more than enough. You speak less. You move cleaner. You no longer chase alignment. You become it. Subscribe if you're done trying to be understood by people who benefit from misunderstanding you. Here, we don't ask to be seen. We become unignorable. We don't explain truth. We wear it like armor. This isn't silence for peace. This is silence for precision. This is cold mind. And in this space, the less you speak, the more they feel you